Hello. I want to make a quick disclaimer before this video starts. I tried recording this several times and it just hasn't been working. The audio didn't work one time. The video was weird. I lost the files, whatever. Just a lot of ugh. So if this video is a little choppy, if it's a little rushed, I do apologize. I just wanted to make sure I had something out for you today prior to the Socratic and as you start working on it. So I apologize if I'm just kind of rushed or something like that. If I glossed over anything, if I missed anything, please just let me know and I will get to those questions ASAP. Thank you for your patience and let's get right into the video. Hello, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you had a good weekend. I hope things are going well and everyone is still safe and happy during this time period. I'm just gonna anyways, so I just want to jump into things today because unfortunately this is probably going to be a bit of a longer video, but I have a lot to talk about in regards to what you hopefully have seen already, which was posted on Monday, and that is your Socratic seminar. So we have finished Of Mice and Men. And we are moving right into what I mentioned, which is our Socratic seminar. If you don't know what a Socratic seminar is, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, but I hopefully gave clear enough instructions. A Socratic seminar is like a group discussion, but the fun part about it is you get to lead it. So what is going to happen is there's two parts to a Socratic seminar. The first part, which you hopefully kind of picked up on, was you need to do prep work. So along with the directions were 11 technically questions. And what you're going to do is you're going to answer 3 of them, if I can count. So you're going to answer 3 of these questions in detail. You're going to give me, I believe I label it as an assertion, which is your opinion. That's answering the question. Then you are going to give me text evidence that supports your answer. So similar to our Crucible summative, direct quotes are going to be your best bet with page numbers and so forth. If you can't find a perfect quote or conversation within the story, feel free to paraphrase a little bit if it's like a conversation. It is explicit, like specific details about the story itself and like key moments, that is fine if you can't get a direct quote. What I'm not going to take is some broad, like in chapter 2 we saw them get to the farm. That's not going to cut it. Okay, so the more detailed and specific, the better and the stronger the evidence will be. After that, you will then give your elaboration, or you're going to defend your opinion. So all these questions are very open-ended and based on your thoughts, your feelings, and your analysis of the story. So there's not a correct answer, and that's actually one of my favorite parts about Socratics, is you can, if you have the evidence to back it up, and if you can convince me, you're not going to be wrong. So just like keep that in mind. So you're going to give me an elaboration, so you're going to connect how your text evidence supports your answer. You're going to elaborate and kind of define and defend the answer you gave. And that's going to be the longest portion. So your initial like opinion like the first thing you do, that's only like maybe 2 sentences at most. If you're writing more than that in that first box, you might want to consider putting some of that in your elaboration. I want to see you like make a definite answer. So just keep that in mind. The last portion of this is you're going to create 2 questions that go along with your answer / kind of piggybacking off the question you answered. So they need to kind of go together. You're going to do that for all 3 questions, and you can pick whichever 3 you want. One of the questions you're offered is actually a wild card, and what that means is you can create your own question as long as it's not a yes or no answer. So maybe you had a question while reading and you want to answer that now. So that is one of your options. The fun thing about that too is then you have to go and answer it and propose it to the group maybe. That leads into the second part of your Socratic. So you've done the prep work. Before I go any farther, this is something I saw in last semester when we did Socratic seminars. The prep work is 50% of your grade. So act like it's 50% of the project. Some people kind of like to skimp out and think it's prep work, like I'm going to earn all my points in the conversation portion. And that's true, like you can earn quite a bit of points, and I see a lot of students do very well in the speaking portion. But your prep work has to match. So keep that in mind when you're doing your prep work. Anyways, So we have our prep work, you answer your questions. The second portion is the discussion. So what's going to happen is I'm going to be putting you in groups of 5, roughly, and you are going to have 20 minutes to have a discussion. What that discussion is going to look like is the 5 of you are going to just have a conversation about Of Mice and Men. And I'm really just going to be kind of an observer / a listener. So I'm going to be observing how you talk to each other. I'm going to evaluate your answers and how you verbalize them. I'm going to see how much are you participating? Are you interrupting people? Are you sitting back and just letting others talk? That kind of thing. That is the discussion portion. So you will, if you want to think about it, or if you're mathematical, you have about 4 minutes of speaking time within your personal discussion. With that being said though, you're going to be answering 3 questions. If you don't get to all of them, that's okay. Again, one of the really fun things about a Socratic seminar is the discussion is yours. As long as you are staying on topic, as long as you are having thoughtful conversations about the book and the questions I proposed to you, or maybe kind of diverging into questions you asked, you're a-okay. So some of you might only answer 1 question. Some of you might half answer 1 at all. I would like everyone to at least answer 1 of their questions or the best they can, or maybe try connecting what you said in 1 question to something that's being brought up. As long as you discuss at some point something you wrote on your prep work, you'll be okay. But understand that only talking once isn't going to cut it either. So that is the Socratic seminar. In total, I feel like it's a popular thing amongst the English classes at Oconomowoc, so hopefully most of you have done one of these before. But if not, and you're still a little confused, please reach out to me and I can kind of talk to you more about it. But with that being said, I think it's time now to jump into our recap of Mice and Men, because I'm not just going to leave you hanging, of course not. The next portion of this video is going to be me discussing the book as a total, and I'm going to be focusing kind of specifically on themes or ideas that you're going to kind of see throughout the Socratic seminar. If I don't cover something you're still confused on, now that you have finished the book and have read or have looked through the questions, I will be answering those questions for tomorrow. So leave those in the attendance box so I can answer them directly and so forth. But for now, I'm going to try and talk about as much as I believe you need for the Socratic seminar itself. Okay, let's talk of Mice and Men, shall we? The first thing I want to do, there's going to be about 2 sections to this video after that first part. I want to break it down, kind of recapping the story itself, and then talking about, I'm just going to label it all themes, but themes and ideas that you need to know or kind of get a better idea of. So before we even jump into themes, I should probably recap the story for you. Chapters 1 and 2 I'm going to leave a little bit alone because I have videos on them specifically, but just to be clear, basic events, we meet George and Lenny. George and Lenny have this dream, and I hope you know what that dream is. It is basically they want to own a farm, and they kind of want to live off their own land, they want to do their own thing, they want to be their own bosses, and that's the main takeaway from that dream itself. They're sick of being told what to do, they're sick of having people above them, they kind of want to fend for themselves. So George and Lenny are making their way through California, and what we come to learn is George kind of has to protect Lenny because Lenny gets himself into some issues. And specifically the issue that we are piggybacking off of and what we're seeing them come from in the story is what happened in Weed. And what happened in Weed is Lenny kind of grabbed a girl's dress without really realizing the consequences of it, and then they got ran out of town. So that's chapter 1. We meet them, we learn these things, they have a dream. Chapter 2 takes us to the farm. That's where we meet all the characters. So we're on the farm, and George doesn't want Lenny talking because George wants to be in control of things, but then the boss finds it kind of weird because George kind of comes across as George trying to take Lenny's pay, and so we have all these things, but basically we're on the farm, we meet all these characters, and the main takeaway is Curly immediately doesn't like Lenny, who specifically is just because Lenny is a tall guy and Curly is not. So George is like, stay away from him and stay away from his wife. And there it is. Do you think that maybe came up later now looking back on it? So we move into the rest of the story, and what ends up happening is we see them in the farm. We kind of get to know these characters a bit more. We find out that Candy ends up putting his dog down by Carlson, and he kind of regrets it because he didn't put his own dog down, and that was really hard on him. And then Candy all of a sudden is involved in the dream of being with George and Lenny. He offers them money. He says we can put down the money now. Like, they can be out of there in a month. So that's the new goal. And for once in their lives, it feels like, or at least from the audience perspective, George and Lenny have a chance at accomplishing their dream. Like, it's actually going to happen, right? Like, they're putting a down payment on this farm, and they're saying, that's it. We're out of here in 1 month's pay. So things are looking up for our protagonists. Curly's being weird. Curly's wife's hanging around. We're kind of like, hey, get away. And then at one point, George goes into town with a couple of the guys, and Lenny stumbles into Crooks's room. And this is where we kind of really meet Crooks. What ends up happening is Crooks is like having a conversation with Lenny, and Crooks tries to be this almighty, like, I don't mind being by myself. And then he kind of picks on Lenny because without George, he wouldn't really be able to do a whole lot. And there's just these like interesting conversations going on. We're in the bunks and they're talking about their dreams, and Curly's wife's missing and Curly's looking for her, and da 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 da. And all of a sudden they're recapping something, and this is the scene where Curly comes in and like Lenny's still laughing because he's still kind of thinking about what was going on previously, and all of a sudden Curly wants to pick a fight with Lenny. And if you read the book, which I hope you did, you know how well that went. So Lenny ends up crushing Curly's hand. They say don't say anything and threaten his masculinity because Lenny's the one that did it to him, if you caught that. Lenny gets a dog. That's another thing that happens in the story. And I'm very sorry for my animal lovers out there, but that didn't go very well, did it? So I'm going to speed up just a smidge bit because you should have read the book. So we have basically what to take forward right now is George and Lenny have a chance at this dream. That is the most important thing to recall right now. And while there's a couple waves, they're still able to achieve this. So they're moving along, they're making their money, they're doing their thing. Then things go south. And what ends up happening is Lenny, just like the mice, unfortunately ends up killing this dog. And so he's really sad about that, and he's in the farm and he's freaking out. And George is with the other guys, like actually having maybe a normal like day for once in his life. And all of a sudden, who waltzes in? None other than Curly's wife. And they actually have a bit of a heart-to-heart. They kind of express this idea of loneliness. And Curly's wife is like, I could have been so much more. And my life sucks. Like, she has a terrible marriage. Curly's awful to her, that kind of thing. And unfortunately, she didn't like catch the signs because similar to what happened in Weed, Lenny doesn't know how to let go of things. So quite literally, he ends up not being able to let go of her as she kind of starts to struggle. He was feeling her hair. Again, the soft material is right. And then all of a sudden we have a dead Curly's wife. So Lenny runs. George and Candy finds the body. Candy and George are like, what do we do now? Curly obviously finds out. George is like, I'll take care of it, The last chapter, very short, but actually one of the most memorable pieces of American literature, or like endings to a book. And what ends up happening is we circle right back to that pond from chapter 1. And it's almost like full circle, right? If you didn't realize, this story took place over the span of like a couple days. I believe it's 6. So all of a sudden they're back where they first started because George had said to Lenny, like, if anything goes wrong, you meet me here, right? And so Lenny remembered that. And it's one of the few things he remembers along with their dream, right? So what ends up happening is George is left with a decision. And this plays into the idea of killing out of mercy. Love and mercy, I should say. Because George ends up making the really difficult decision of killing Lenny. And a couple of you in the comments for this attendance form from Friday or Thursday, jeez, our latest attendance form, were a little confused by this, or kind of asked like, why would he do that? He shouldn't have done that. And here's what I kind of want to talk about. This is probably the biggest part of the book, right? So we see these two men, these two friends, go through the six, we have a sense of what's going on with them. We're rooting for them, or at least that's the intention, right? We're rooting for them to accomplish what they're looking for. And what this ending does, it sets in this realization that, like, we can't, and we might not be able to. Because if you think about it, George did everything he could to protect Lenny, to move forward with their dreams and their accomplishments, to keep them working, to get him out of trouble. He did everything. And some would argue everything right. He did everything he could to keep persevering. And in the end, he does not get to accomplish that. Because if you think about it, and some people argue this, some people say, well, George can still continue to go on and get his dream, or he can still go own that farm. But we're missing the idea of companionship and the fact that George's dream wasn't to get a farm. As much as he threatened to leave, or what life could have been like without Lenny, his dream still always encompassed him. And that's like the saddest part of this. I mean, obviously it's very sad that Lenny died. And some people wonder why he did it. Well, it's kind of going back to this idea of killing out of love and mercy. If you ever watched that video recapping chapter 2 when I first brought up this idea. So we saw this in the beginning, like previously in the book, with that dog. And Candy's dog is old and he's like, his bones hurt, he's an old dog. And if you ever had a pet, you kind of know how that goes. Eventually it gets to a point where you have to ask yourself, like, are they living a good life still, or are they in pain? And that was the kind of moral question with the dog. Because Carlson was like, he's got to be miserable, like, but Candy on the emotional side is saying, like, but he's my companion. So you see, that's called foreshadowing, ladies and gents. George is left with a similar dilemma, because what's ended up happening is Lenny continues to get himself in trouble, and is eventually, prior to this, he was worried about getting someone hurt, and now he's officially gotten someone hurt, more than hurt, because she's dead. And what do? Do you continue to let him live, and what's going to happen next? Who's going to fall victim next? Or do you maybe let go? And that's the decision George had to make. And looking at the scene, what happens is Lenny gets to recount their dream, like his favorite memory, his fondest, like, portion of his life. And it's something with George, and they're in this by the pond, and he gets to recall something that brings him so much joy, and that's his last memory. Versus the possibility of, if Lenny were to ever get caught, which he probably would have if things would have continued, people would not have understood. People would not have treated him the way George did, which I know sounds super twisted because George is the one who killed him. But people wouldn't have understood him like George did, and things could have been way worse. Am I justifying the fact that George killed him? I'm not saying that either. He still killed someone. Like, it's an odd thing to end with, because you have a hard time deciding who was right, what was the right call. And that is of Mice and Men in general. So, okay, long-winded, kind of sporadic, but that is of Mice and Men. That is what happened. Now, let's talk about themes. Stick with me the last portion of the video, I promise, but I wanted to get this all out there today for you. So, themes of Mice and Men. Alright, let's talk theme. So if you don't know what a theme is like a main idea or an underlying message or like meaning within a literary work. And sometimes it's not directly referenced, it's something we maybe have to infer as we read. So while I was kind of looking through some of your chapter 1 and chapter 2 analysis worksheets, some of you were saying things like setting or foreshadowing, and those aren't themes. Those are literary devices or literary tools that help us understand the story. So setting, the farm is a setting, the pond's a setting, that's a place that things are taking place at. Foreshadowing is like referencing something is referencing something to come. So Candy's dog dying is a foreshadowing of Lenny dying, right? But those aren't themes. That isn't a message, that isn't an idea or main concept that is being brought up throughout the story. Themes, you could argue there's quite a few themes in this story, and I'm not going to rattle off the 10 to 15 I could maybe list, but I have about 3 that I want to focus on for you and kind of surround the Socratic seminar itself. If there's other ones, please, again, you can argue any kind of theme as long as you have evidence and a valid explanation. It's one of the beautiful things about English, ladies and gents. There's a lot of correct answers. So I have 3 I kind of want to focus on, and then from there, if you have any questions on maybe what a theme you think is there, talk to me about it. But these are the main ones I kind of want to make sure you understand. So the first one, I'm going to start with these first 2 because they kind of go hand in hand. 2 of these 2 themes within the story is the idea of being lonely or loneliness, and then another one is friendship and companionship. And these 2 tie together. So the first one of loneliness, and I think I have a direct question about this one. So loneliness is brought up quite a bit in this story from a lot of different characters, and sometimes you gotta dig a little bit, but I think almost every character in this story brings up an idea of loneliness and what loneliness looks like to them. For example, Crooks. Crooks likes to pretend he's okay with being by himself. He even directly says, I don't like when people, he is lonely and he's lacking companionship due to social construct of racism. So because of the time period, because of the color of his skin, because of something he can't control, he is being separated from the people around him, so he is there lonely. He does not get to have the social interaction, and it's not something that he's choosing. It's just that whole thing is a facade, right? So kind of one of the things to understand, and one of the things John Steinbeck is trying to get across during this book, is we as humans are social creatures. As much as we like to hang around by ourselves, as much as we like to lock ourselves away, eventually we want human contact in some shape or form. Whether it be family, friends, classmates, teachers, whatever it might be, we like to be around people just in various amounts, depending on our personalities. So not only are we social creatures, we have what John Steinbeck tries to portray with his characters is this fear of being alone, this fear of isolation. So what Lenny and George have, this friendship, is actually quite rare, because during this time period, and specifically looking at migrant workers were very lonely people. They didn't travel in packs. It was very much fend for yourself, because farms would only be hiring a couple of people at a time. You were constantly moving, and not necessarily people moving with you. So the fact that George and Lenny were traveling together, the fact that they had this friendship, was something that people not only didn't see, but it was very much wanted amongst people, because it was a lot of being by yourself. And while some of us might really enjoy being alone, it's not a lifestyle everyone is conducive to. So it got to a point, not only in the story that we see demonstrated, but in real life, because remember, this is a reflection of our time period. John Steinbeck based this off of real people and real feeling and emotion. People were so desperate for companionship or just to be with someone, to not feel so alone, that just having a conversation with a stranger was okay. For example, with Curly's wife. So she was constantly going around the farm and talking to the farm hands and trying to, have conversations and don't ignore me and da-da-da-da. And we see that because she's in a lonely marriage. Think about it. Curly is mean to her. They don't get along. He's not a great person, and she's stuck in a crappy marriage that had false promises. So now she's stuck with someone who doesn't care about her, who's constantly gone. So yes, she's lonely, and she wants to interact with people. And even simply just bothering George is good enough for her, because it's the only human interaction she's getting. And remember, we are social creatures. We can't keep up with this. We have a fear of being by ourselves, or that is what we're seeing in the story. That is the theme, a fear of loneliness, a fear of isolation and being by yourself. John Steinbeck tries showing us that we can be the most powerful, the wealthiest people, it does not matter. But as soon as someone kind of strikes that nerve, loneliness or being alone is something that can weaken just about anyone. So loneliness is our first theme, kind of piggybacking off the second theme, which is friendship, and I've already kind of overlapped with it, so bear with me. But John Steinbeck shows an obvious theme of friendship in the story because it is surrounding a friendship, right? We see George and Lenny living their life, having each other's backs, doing the best they can, and kind of conquering the idea of our first theme, which is loneliness. And we have to remember that achieving a friendship like that is something that people want, especially during this time period, due to how lonely things can get and how alone you can be in a world like this. And remember, the time period, our historical context is so important because we're in the Great Depression. We are in a very scary and sad time. I mean, think about your friends right now. How many of you have turned to people, your friends specifically, for help? How many of you have cried on a friend's shoulder? How many of you have been cheered up by a friend during a hard time? Imagine, think of the impact your friends have on your life. And you chose them to be there. And that is the most beautiful thing about friendship, is you choose who your friends are. Family comes, you're stuck with them, right? But your friends are the people you choose to have in your life. And how important that is, and the people you surround yourself, that's what we're seeing in the story. Crazy, right? All right, the last thing I want to talk about today, and the last theme that I'm going to really make sure you understand, is that of the American dream. What is the American dream? The American dream is the ideal of accomplishing what you want to accomplish. It's setting a goal and saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to better my life because of it. The American dream is the end of the tunnel. It's the light at the end. It's saying, hey, I made it. And everyone has their own, right? We all have different dreams and aspirations. And it's how the American dream is this idea of what can I accomplish with the freedom I've been given, right? That's what they kind of said it as from the very beginning. I mentioned when we first started this story, this unit, that if you've read Gatsby, then you're familiar with the idea of the unachievable American dream, or the inability to achieve the American dream. And the basis of the American dream is a theme, but also corresponding with the idea that is it possible to accomplish, the inability to achieve it. And we kind of talked about this previously in this video, but someone asked me, they're like, did we achieve the dream? Did they achieve the dream? No. And I think that's one of the saddest parts of this book, is no. They didn't. Because their American dream was to be on a farm together, living out their lives, being their own bosses, and finally all their hard work paid off. And it's not something they get to accomplish anymore. And people will argue. Don't they know I'm recording? My gosh. George could go off and get a farm, and he could go with Candy, and things would be fine, and he could be his own boss, and he could accomplish, let's call it 90% of it. But it will not be the full dream because Lenny won't be there with him. And you can look and say, well, that's because of George. But then I counter with, where do you think Lenny would be now if George hadn't done what he did? Again, not justifying it, but you have to think of the angles. How would he have been treated? How are people treating people like Lenny during this time period? So, I'm going to keep this brief because there's a lot of questions with this in the Socratic seminar, and I'm curious what your opinions are going to be. But understand that the American dream is basically all your hard work and there's an end goal to it, right? You have an accomplishment waiting for you, and you have a goal in mind to make your life better. And keep in mind that, especially during this time period, and one of the ideologies of modernism is life has knocked you down so many times, right? With George, he was knocked down constantly because of Lenny's actions. And he even had a chance, right? He had a moment of saying, I could maybe accomplish this with Candy's help. And even then, it didn't happen. Okay, I feel like I've rambled enough. I hope I cleared up some things. I hope I kind of discussed them well. If I didn't, please just let me know. I ask questions and so forth. I will make another question video tomorrow answering any content questions. You haven't left me a ton of just random questions, so I will answer those maybe at the end of the week or something like that. But if you need anything, as always, I am just an email away. My office hours today are 9 to 1. If you would like to practice your video conference with me, that's fine. If you have a question about the Socratic, that is all you're working on the next 2 days, is getting your prep work in, getting ready for the Socratic on Friday. So pretty easy and breezy for the next 2 days. That's it. So let me know if you need anything, and I will see you tomorrow.